Welcome to the Team Loco Fit Show. I'm your host, Lauren Conlon. Each week, we bring you the best insights in nutrition, mental health, habit building, training, and more. This week, I'm joined by Coach Sam to discuss finding and giving advice in the health and fitness space. Enjoy the show. Okay, Sam, so you came up with this topic, and I absolutely love it because I think that a lot of people are in a position to where they want to learn more, but they don't really know where to go or how to find advice. And they might even be approached to give advice, but they're not really sure how to handle that, how to navigate that. I know a lot of our clients, fall into both of these scenarios, whether they are coaches themselves, trainers,
Mhm.
looking to learn more, or maybe just made a really big transformation and people are now asking them and they're like, wait, I don't know how to approach this topic. So let's first start with just looking at references, like examining the references of what you're finding.
Yeah. And I think that the reason we want to start here is because this examination process can be applied to anywhere you're finding resources. Like any resource you find, going through this checklist of things can help you determine whether or not it's credible or whether or not it's worth your time.
Yeah. So first is going to be credentials, right? So if you're looking at this could be an Instagram post, this could be a blog or an article on somebody else's website or research, like whatever it is, right? What is this person's background, right? Are they saying things that maybe they shouldn't be saying and they don't have those credentials? And they're not giving a disclaimer, right? Like, and I'm all about saying, hey, here's this information that we potentially have, or here's this anecdotal experience. But, disclaimer
Mhm.
here. And I think that that's a really, really important part of it. So when you're looking at credentials, it's not to say that if you don't have specific credentials, you can't give advice. That's totally wrong. And we don't
Mhm.
believe in that, obviously. But it is important to look at that. If you're reading something, say you are reading something from a website or a blog, and it seems like, oh my gosh, this is the answer to a lot of my problems, right? Then you have to really look, okay, what are these credentials from this person? And then also, what is their experience? Like,
Yeah.
did they just start? Have they been doing this business for a long time? Do they have any personal experience with it? And this is, of course, going to range really depending on what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
There's like a
Yeah.
big difference of like medical advice, or anything like that versus, just like, hey, here's how I dropped X amount of pounds, which still could,
Right.
you know, so there's
Yeah.
layers to
And
it.
I think it's up to your comfort level and what you're looking for too. There might be somebody who, maybe you're just looking for like how to get more protein in your diet and you find a blog that just lists some high protein rich foods and there's no credentials, there's no anything, but you can pretty much deduce that, oh yeah, it's chicken breast. Like I'm sure that's high protein and it like everything makes sense, checks out to you based on your understanding. Then that's fine. It doesn't need to be, they have a master's in food sciences for you to get a list of high protein rich foods. But if it's something more like, uh, I don't know, something that's related to like, foods to help lower your resting blood sugar or something, or your fasting blood sugar, like that's something that you might want to have a little bit more background in than like, just I just found this list of foods online from this Foods R Us website. Like
Yeah, or
having
like
a little
fix
bit
your
more background.
hypothyroidism with these 3 foods, like, no,
Exactly.
like,
Exactly.
anybody who's writing, and that's the other thing too, anybody who's writing something with that, like, with that as a headline and then not followed up with, like, because sometimes we'll have headlines, obviously you wanna have something that is clickbaity or at least enticing, not even clickbait, but just enticing to click on.
Yeah.
So sometimes the title could be a little aggressive, right? But then you have to see what is the meat of that context. If they're like, "Hey, yeah, here's how you fix your hypothyroidism. Here's 3 things to do," and you're like, "Wait, no context, no," like we're going to deduce from X situation, and stuff like that is just all over the internet.
Yeah.
Which is horrifying.
Yeah. I think we should maybe touch on that at the end, do some like red flags for advice because I think that is one too. It's like the more extravagant the advice,
Hmm.
or I guess like yeah, just out there the advice is, the less likely it is to be credible. Um But
But the problem is it's not really out there, it's out there to us because we know that. So the problem is,
right.
I would say one of the I guess a red flag is that if you are deducing something that is if you're sorry, reducing something that is very complex to a seemingly very simple answer, that
Mhm,
is a huge red flag
mhm,
because there is rarely a simple answer when it comes to anything in regards to our body and our
mhm,
physiology, because there's so many things that are intertwined
mhm,
that if you're seeing somebody say that,
mhm,
that is a number one red flag because to us, we would see that and say, "Oh, of course not. It's not that simple." But to somebody who doesn't have that background, they might go, "Oh, here's the answer I've been looking for."
right.
And that's where we can kind of run into some issues. And then, of course, what are somebody's biases? What is the funding? That's going to be something where, um, that's more like maybe uh, scientific literature based. You can
Mhm,
see, and typically you can see that at the end of a paper. They say, there was no conflict of interest, or, so and so funded this, etc. And a lot of times too, there will be like if there's a lot of science educators now in the kind of the education and the podcast and and social media world, which is amazing. But they are typically the good ones are very forward with I am a investor here or I am on this board. Like if anybody follows Peter Attia, he talks about the Aura Ring a lot, right? And he's like, I believe he's like an investor and or like consults with them for stuff. So he says that on there, right? And then there's other times where, if you listen to somebody else, we're like, hey, here's a sponsor for our show, but this is not affiliated to my research, etc. So, there has to be that's another really good thing to look for. Okay, is this person credible? In that sense. So you can look into that. And that's again more in kind of like the science literature kind of sphere,
yeah.
but they do have to say that. But unfortunately, which this is kind of like the dark side of academia, well, there's a lot of dark sides to academia, but or just research in general, that a lot of times there will be people who, like, say a company funds something, um, and then they don't get a like a good answer, right? Like
Mhm,
it didn't work. They may or may not publish. They may say like you can't publish this, and that
mhm,
typically doesn't happen as much in academia. It happens more in like the outside of academia research where you have like a lab and then somebody's paying you. So not to say that they're changing the data, but if it's not a response that they want, they might
mhm,
not share it.
yeah.
So there's always those kinds of things as well. And then lastly, of course, if you are following maybe like an individual person, sponsorships, affiliates, etc., and there this goes both sides. I think that there is um a lot of people have a big distaste for like influencers or affiliates, etc., because they see, oh, well, this person must just be getting paid, and they don't really believe in it. But that comes down to you following that person and seeing, okay, what other information do they put out, right? So I'm in St. Louis this weekend. I'm in a hotel room. I'm here out for First Form's banquet, and First Form's a company that I've worked with for over 4 years. Everybody on the team works with them as well. We fully support them as a company, but that's also because we have reasons to support them. We're not saying that this is the only company. This is the one that we recommend based on all of these things. This is why we think they're the best.
Mhm,
But we also are putting out other credible information, right? It's not like I just took this product because they told me I had to and they paid me $1 million, right? Like they're so I think that if you're following somebody who is credible in their area and you see them using a certain product or a company, that should be a good like when I see somebody that I know who I trust and respect their opinion and they share something, I wanna go buy that, you know what I mean? Because now I go, "They've vetted this whole process. They wouldn't be telling me this if they didn't actually like it."
yeah.
So I think that that comes down to the viewer discretion to see, okay, what else is this person putting out? Not just about this one company, but about everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's how you can deduce whether or not it's a quality recommendation.
Yeah. And their track record, like that, the influencer or the, YouTuber, whoever you're listening to,
Mhm.
like if they've done a bunch of random sponsorships in the past and it's like, this is just another random thing they're talking about, or like, it kind of goes back to that like biases type of thing too. It's like, what how like invested are you in this thing, and like sometimes it can be a clear like you like the way that they present the product, I think is what I'm trying to say, is like,
Yes.
this is your answer, this is your solution, you need to get this thing now. It's like, whoa, like again, that over exaggeration, the like you said, refining it down to like this big thing is now going to be solved by this one thing is a red flag again. And so being able to look at that and be like, okay, why would they push this as my one solution?
Mhm.
Because they benefit highly from it, which that's great, but it's probably not going to be your one solution. And being able to recognize that tie, that connection, can help you then make that judgment call.
100%. And I think the track record is a good thing. If people
Mhm,
are jumping from company to company, and not to say that you can never change companies, right? Like I understand that things happen, things
mhm,
change within companies with the person, their direction, like all of those things are reasonable, right? You can't hold that over somebody's head. But if they are bouncing from company to company to company all the time, they are very just kind of flaky with everything. That's not a good representation, you know? And I'm very lucky that the companies that I have worked with over the years, like I've been able to do that for many years. And I stand behind those companies for that reason, you know, and I can see how they grow and how they change. And again, it comes down to, are you presenting it as like, this is the only solution to your very complex problem? Or, hey, this could probably help in this context.
mhm,
That is such a different answer. So I think that a lot of people have a bad taste in their mouth because of bad sponsorships and affiliate marketing. But I think that if it is done right, like that where I get a lot of my stuff is because of people that I follow and I trust who are like, hey, this is like this works or this is great. And like
yep,
that's what I think that social media should be about in this context. And this is now kind
mhm.
of degrading to a different like topic, but I think it's important because people always ask about this stuff. Or remember
Right,
when we did our like navigating online interactions podcast and a lot of people were like, "Oh, I feel like everybody's trying to sell me something." And it's
yeah,
like, well, yes, right? There are certainly people who they only come on and they're only trying to sell stuff. Like that is a real thing. But if
mhm,
somebody is sharing quality information or they're entertaining or you like following them for whatever reasons, right? And then they also share stuff that they like that they use, like that's something that I'm like, I'm going to try this. Like I want to get this. And you may or may not even still like it, but it's at least something that you know, okay, this is backed and not just like a total BS thing.
yeah,
Some of my best purchases are from other people recommending like companies and trying this. And you
yeah,
know, we all got that friend, right? Who's like, oh, you got to do this, or you like everybody has one of
yeah,
those.
yeah,
Everybody knows Chanel is that person for me. If Chanel's like, yo, this is okay, I'm buying it. Like I don't even need to look more into it. Like she is the
yep,
most convincing person because I know for her, like she is very, very stringent. So if she says she likes something or she doesn't, like that is
mhm,
a real answer.
yeah,
So yeah, so examining references and looking at all of these things when you are, regardless of if it is, you know, a scientific paper, like a published paper, if it's a blog or an Instagram post, or if it is something that, you know, whether it's, you know, affiliate sponsorship type related information, I think that
mhm,
this background, like you said, creating that framework for how to view these things is how we should look really at everything.
right, yeah,
So that'll
yeah,
be first, and then next would be, okay, well, how do we even find good resources and good references, right?
yeah,
Everybody always wants to, you know where to learn more. So you wrote on a really great list of just a few things, and we'll just run through them. So online, so if, especially in the world of published scientific literature, unless you have a background in that, and even if you have a background in that, like to be super honest, like I mean, I have a master's and it's still hard to read through that stuff, right? Um, Especially with like all the statistics and everything. Like that was one of those classes I was like, I'm just kind of getting through it, you know what I mean? So it is very hard to not only read scientific papers, unfortunately, but that just the way that they're written is complicated. But also there's so much. Like there is so much. If you type in anything, You go to Google Scholar and you type in a topic, you're like, what the, like, there's so much. So one really great thing, if you're interested in science, but maybe you're like, I don't want to sift through all of these journals, all of these topics, and I just want like the kind of meat and potatoes of like what this means and how this applies to me. Online journal subscriptions are amazing. So one that we use, and the company that I've supported since it started, is actually, it's called Mass, MASS, and it makes it really, really accessible and easy to understand. And there's some other really great ones as well, but this is just one that I feel like they cover a really wide variety of topics, and they do a really great job of breaking it down in a way that's easy to understand.
Yeah. And it's very, like you said, accessible to anybody. And the way that they will take an article and they will summarize it for you essentially. And they'll take put out their key takeaways and then what they feel is missing in the
Mhm.
research as
I
well.
love that
Like,
part.
yeah, so you can already kind of see that bias too, where they're like, they didn't do this, or like it seems like it's coming from this place. So you get that kind of filter of examining the reference already there for you, and you can trust it just as is most
Yeah,
of the time. And it's the journal hub itself is very well laid out, where you can go and type in any type of topic. It'll bring up anything that you're looking for. It's already categorized. So let's say we're going to talk about sports psychology one week. We can go into that and find all of the resources. Or you have a client who's having an issue with mindset around training. You can go into that category and look for it. It's just wonderful. And this is a great thing for like sponsorship and affiliated. Like, I'm not affiliated with this. You have been or are, but
mhm,
we both have like the same exact experience. So it shows you like when you truly believe in something, like
100%.
it's easy
You
to talk about and trust. But
want to talk about it, and everybody who's
yeah,
on the main authors are all incredible scientists, researchers, coaches. And then whenever they bring somebody on as like a guest, you can just know, okay, this person is really qualified. So we'll put the link below. I do have a link if you guys are interested. And just check it out. And I think that it's something that a lot of people would benefit from, especially if you're just looking to learn more, but also especially if you're a coach. The coaches and just people interested in learning can really apply. And like you said, it's so easy to navigate. Of course, books are great. So, we both love reading. And I would say that,
I'm an audiobook gal myself.
okay, well, that's still, I mean, it's hard for me. Audiobooks are so hard for me. I can listen to podcasts, no problem.
Yeah,
Audiobooks are very much a challenge, because there's not it's just a single person, right? Just reading. And for
yeah,
me, I have to be in a very particular, like, mental space to be able to focus. Like if I'm going on a
yeah,
long drive, no problem. I can put on an audiobook and I got it. If I'm doing something for 10 minutes or I'm cleaning up, no, 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 I gotta be super focused. So that's why I like the being able to read. But just in general, books
yeah,
are a great way to expand your
right.
knowledge. And now I will say that if somebody is writing, or if you're reading a book, it is really, really hard because of how the process of writing a book and editing it and publishing it, all of that goes. It can be really hard to keep the up-to-date current scientific literature. Now, not to say that it has to be outdated, but if you're looking for like the up-to-date science, like research articles are number one, because it's what's always going to be faster to be published. A book is going to take several years to put together and then probably take a while.
Yeah,
So obviously, though, books can have, depending on the type of book that you're reading, can have really great references. And I mean, that you can still reference stuff that was from years ago. It's not like you have to only have current things, but just saying that it will take a little bit of a time. But I just love reading too, especially to be able to learn about different topics that maybe, I'm interested in, that I'm not skilled in. I'm not going to know where to really look. So if there's somebody who is credible in their area, and it has an interesting, title and the whole gist of the book, I'm going to get that. And I can say, okay, I can dive into this fully. Same thing with podcasts, right? I think it's
yeah,
a really great thing now, especially because there's so many like science educators out there now. You guys know I love Huberman. He is like, honestly, it is so rare to find somebody who's able to talk about complex subjects that much
mhm,
like that, like such high level stuff and really make it applicable,
Yeah.
which is really, really nice. And he's just one of many. Obviously, I already mentioned Peter Attia, he's great. There's so many different ones, but not even just that. Like, I just love listening to other podcasts too. Like Lex Fridman has a great podcast. He talks about all different types of topics with all different types of people. He's an AI researcher. He's in all this. Like, I would never be. That's just not my field of obviously expertise. Clearly, or really even interest, right? Like that's not what I'm
Yeah.
like trying to do with my life. But he interviews all these different people, and you're like, wow, I just learned all these different perspectives. And so I think that there's so much that can be learned through books, and of course, podcasts as well, and just audiobooks. And I don't know, there's something about books too that are just like, especially good storytellers, right? Even if it's like a more science-based book, there's
Yeah.
definitely people who are better writers than others, you know? I've talked about him before, but I love Cal Newport. He's like, I think he's a computer engineer professor. I could be wrong. He's something like that. But he has amazing books. I recommend them all the time. So Good They Can't Ignore You, Digital Minimalism, um, Deep Work, like some just awesome, awesome books on like productivity and self-development and all these different types of things. But like just the way that he writes,
Mhm.
there's other books on these topics as well, but I just love his style. So I think that finding, people that you enjoy reading from, I try to share obviously book resources all the time.
Yeah.
Um, right now, I'm like, what am I reading right now? Oh, I'm reading Brett Weinstein and his wife Heather, I don't know how to say her last name, book. It's like the Hunter Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century. So they're evolutionary biologists. So they're applying that lens of like, our past into like how to navigate the future through all different types of topics. It's really, really interesting. But yeah, I'm not an evolutionary biologist. I don't really give two
Yeah.
shits about evolutionary biology, but it's interesting for me to say, hey, I'm going to learn from this book, and maybe I'll take a few things away from it, and maybe it'll also spark what I love about reading, which I'm sure you do too. Like it sparks interest in another area that you're like,
Yeah.
oh, now I can go into this.
Yeah. I actually just finished a book called Strange Situation, and I don't know the author's name off the top of my head. I'm going to share it this week on Should I Love Sunday,
Yeah.
but it's about attachment in children, which
Oh,
we just did the podcast with Rick on attachment styles, but she was interested in it in her daughter, so she went in and looked at the original research on attachment styles, and she became like so engulfed in it that she went like and dedicated her whole life to like writing this book about it, and she intertwines it with how she did it with her daughter and how she did it and what the research found, and it was just like so refreshing to have both sides of that, have the research and have her personal experience at
yeah.
once. But that's something that, like you said, like I'm never going to be an expert on that, nor do I really want to be, but it also made me feel really confident in the way I'm raising my son, and gave me ideas for forming better attachments with him, which is
Mhm.
it was just so cool. But again, it's something that I wouldn't have had otherwise, and it really did engulf me in her storytelling. And I think that's another thing about books too, is that you have the books that are those solid references
Mhm.
where it's maybe not like up to date, it's not like ever changing, but Brett's book, the glute guide, like that's not really going to change too much over time. There might be new exercises that can be thrown in, but that's a solid reference to have if you're like, I'm not looking to be a glute expert. Like, I don't really need to be. I was blessed with like,
You're like, got this Thompson fat pad, It's
I
like,
got my Thompson fat pad, blessed with it. It was a curse, now it's a blessing. I'm sure it'll be a curse in the future. But like, I don't need to be an expert in glute physiology, but I can look at that book from time to time. I can read through it. I enjoyed reading it the first time. Like I always have that as a reference now because it exists, and I'm so grateful that it does. Same thing with a lot of like nutrition, like textbooks and things like that. Like they're really great references, especially for professionals to have on hand. Oh my gosh, the Girls Gone Strong prenatal certification. We can talk about that in a bit, but that book has been a lovely reference for me in working with all my pregnant and postnatal women, and they're just there, and they're just that's one of the great thing about books is you have that go to that you can trust.
yes. But especially in the world of nutrition, you do have to use that the first kind of lens that we talked about, right?
Mm.
Because there's a lot of books,
Oh,
especially in the nutrition field, that are very fear mongering, that are very so dialed into one thing or very anti another thing. So
Yes.
you just have to be aware of, when you're reading something, you can say, oh, I'm going to take this. Like there are certain things that I read that I'm like, all right, I'm going to take this and I fully know that this person is coming with the right intentions. They've done all the background research. So another book we recommend all the time, The Upside of Stress. If you're a client, you've heard us talk about this, right?
Yes.
It is probably one of my most recommended books, especially for the people that, our types of clients. And it's all about building stress resiliency and how like stress isn't good or bad. It's, basically how you view it and stress perception. And she does a fantastic job of laying out all of the literature. It's fully cited. So when I read that, it's going against some of maybe the more like conventional views of this, but she's backing this up not only as she a professor at Stanford and does her own research, this is all fully backed with literature, right? So this isn't just some person who's like, here's my thought piece and my opinion on stress. Or, to take the food example, a lot of books, especially like I said, in the nutrition field, have like they're so specific and they're so
Yeah.
against other stuff. It's like, all right, use this to say, wow, this really sparked my interest. And this could potentially be true, but how can I apply this to my lens? And what does this really mean for the greater picture? So just be discerning in your view, especially when it comes to books. And so just kind of see somebody's track record and apply those first, examining their references and credentials before you start. But yeah, books are incredible. And, I just feel like it's fun to like learn new things. Maybe I'm just because I'm like that, but I enjoy learning different things that I normally wouldn't
Mhm.
and then be able to like talk about them and share them. And I don't know,
Yeah.
just I feel like you become a more well-rounded person when
Yes.
you, at least
Absolutely.
at least that's how I feel about it. But
Yep.
I'm not really into nonfiction. Sorry, I'm not really into fiction reading. I know some people love fiction books. I've never been able to get into fiction. Um, I think the last time, basically, once I got out of undergrad, I'd never read a fiction book until, well, I read 1984 last year, which doesn't really feel like a fiction book anymore, but that's more in the nonfiction section now. But like literally, that was I got so engrossed in the story. So I understand why people like those books. But for me, I personally, from like a fun perspective, I would rather watch something, right? So like I'd rather watch like a show or a movie that's, fiction essentially, and then use my reading and like listening for nonfiction. But
Yeah.
anyways, so courses, another really great thing, courses. We have a really great course, cough, cough. Uh, just a slight plug because we worked so hard on this, mostly Sam, but it was a collaborative effort, but Sam absolutely killed it. Our
Thank
first course ever, our little baby.
you.
So we just wanted to do a foundations of nutrition course because we thought, this is a really useful tool for people who are just starting out who are, to be fair, so confused because there's so much online. There's all these different conflicting things. How do we have this baseline? How do we create this foundation? So that's why we made the course. Obviously, there's a million other courses as well. And ours that's a pretty general one. We do plan on making more specific ones. So I think it just needs to go again, use the reference back. Okay, how do we trust this person? What are their credentials, et cetera? And then figure out, do you want kind of just like a general course, or are you looking to be more specific? And that's going to really depend on your goals and like your work trajectory and kind of how you want to use this and apply it.
Yeah. And that was the whole reason why we, started the course in the first place, is because coming from somebody without a nutrition or exercise science undergrad, when I wanted to learn more, it was damn near impossible for me to find anything cohesive, especially back in 2015 when I started. But there was, it was just picking information from here and there and having to go through that process every time of being like, is this credible, is this not, is this true, is this not, and then trying to take things that were way above my head and try to, like, okay, I don't know what that word means, look that up, I don't know what that, look it up, as opposed to having something that was all in one place, that wasn't $800 to get a certification in something, which is another awesome resource we'll talk about. But I wasn't looking to like go into that yet. I didn't want to do anything with this. I just wanted to know. And so this is why we came out with the course. And there are a lot of different courses out there in pretty much anything you could want to know now. You can even go to Teachable, where our courses through, and you can look at other courses people have made. So you can
Oh, nice.
find things in like photography or I don't know, needle point stitching or whatever you want to learn about. It's out there for us now, and YouTube is another great place to get those kind of course like materials
Mhm.
with that lens of is this credible or not. But those are now out there, and they're really again accessible and um, specific to what you want to learn.
Yeah, know who's putting it out. Know, okay, what am I looking just to gather information, which is what a course would offer? Or, is a certification something that is more my speed, right? Do I want to be certified in this because this is what I'm going to be doing for a career? To be honest, I don't think that unless you are working in a specific field, I don't think that you need a certification, right? Like I personally don't think you do. I
Right.
think that between um in-person seminars and courses,
Mhm.
and even, like podcasts and stuff and books, I think that that's more than enough, right? But a certification is real. Why did I say that so weird? A
I
certification.
don't know.
A certification
Certification.
is very fancy. But no, I think that if you want to be in this field, so another one that I work with, so it's called Sports Nutrition Association, and they started actually in Australia, and then they've moved over now. I'm on the board for the U.S. Committee, and it's really really great. So basically, it goes through, I mean, anything that you could want to know, from everything from bioenergetics to like metabolism. So they're going into the science, anatomy, physiology, all of this. And then there's also the specialty stuff, because this is geared specifically for fitness coaches. So it's all right, is there how business 101, essentially, like marketing, like how to set up check-ins. And
Yeah.
then, every year we supply, different types of talks, to where, this year mine was on communication strategies. And so, before it was on social media, and then, so there's different ones that we also add to. So, but it's 100% dedicated to people who are interested in being in this field. So
Yeah.
that's great. And you have that pre and postnatal certification. So that was very specific. You knew, okay, I'm in this field, I'm a coach, I want to work with moms. So this
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense. And not saying that you wouldn't be able to work with moms if you didn't have that, but it's just another layer of
Mhm.
information, and you want to be doing this. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And with certifications, I feel like they get a bad rap sometimes. Like people will be like, any 18-year-old out of high school can get an ACE certification, and absolutely they can.
Yeah,
But
that's what I
if
did.
yeah, but if I'm going to trust, an 18-year-old without a certification still going to spew some advice, who would I rather listen to? So is that going to be who I go to for my information? Probably not. But if I'm another 18-year-old who doesn't have anybody in my circle, like that'd be nice to have that person as a reference. And it's really all about what you do and how you go about taking that certification. Anybody, you're right, can click through and just, finish a certification, sure. But if you're going to actually look at the information, you're going to take it in, you're going to apply it to your life, like they could be fantastic. And I think that for especially, again, someone who didn't have that background, I wasn't going to just be able to jump right into a degree. And I didn't want to go get another bachelor's. So I did a couple certifications before I went in and got my master's. And I already had to like teach myself throughout my entire master's degree, which was pain in the ass, but I at least had some kind of understanding beforehand because I had taken these certifications. So, are they the end all be all? No. Does having a certification automatically make you an expert? Absolutely not. But it does give you the information that can make you a valuable resource for other people too.
100%. I fully support them. Especially in lieu of, not everybody can go to school for certain things,
Mhm.
nor do they necessarily need to. And I think it just depends.
Right.
Again, what is your interest? What do you want to do? What is feasible for your life?
Yeah.
Obviously, we're big proponents of continuing education, right, in any capacity, and especially degrees, right? Like we both have our masters. Everybody on the team has worked in some capacity in academia, done research, etc. Like we are all fully, like, if anybody supports it, it's us. I think a lot of people trash academia nowadays, and to be fair, I get it. There are a lot of reasons why certain people don't need to go for certain degrees, right? I'm not going to say that certain degrees are necessary, right? Can you still learn a lot
Mhm.
from college? Of course. So we're not, that's a totally different discussion, but I think
Yeah.
that in the sciences, there's nothing that's going to replace that if you want to do research and you have these types of questions and you want to go through that process. There is nothing that is going to replace that. So
Yeah.
we fully support that if you want to get a degree. Is it necessary? No, but do you learn a lot of different skills and can you engage in research in ways that you would never be able to otherwise? 100%.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I think that if if this is of interest to you and you can make it work. And there's a lot of really great programs now too that are geared towards individuals who are working, who have careers, and
Yeah.
I think that, a lot of times, at least when I was, obviously in undergrad and grad school, that was what I was doing. But if I were to go back now, I would have to do a degree that understood those requirements, right? It might take me longer, but I would
Mhm.
have to go somewhere that it was not like you're on campus all day, every day, and this is what you're doing. Like it's just not feasible. So
Mhm.
there's plenty of programs that are geared towards that. And you can take kind of at your own pace if that might be an option.
Yeah.
And then
And
sorry, you broke up a
yeah,
little bit, but
and then social media is the last place, which I again another thing that gets a really bad rap and for good reason. It can be a cesspool, but I mean, as we are people who put out educational resources on Instagram, we clearly find value in it because it's a really great place to disseminate free information and in an aesthetically pleasing way, which makes people more likely to read it. I love our Instagram page. If you haven't been on our Instagram page recently, please go and look at how pretty it is. It's so pretty.
I know you love that so much, it's hilarious, but yes, to be fair, like, that has never been a strong suit of mine, right? I think everybody understands that, and then when I finally was like, "We want to change the Instagram page, and we really wanna make it this, like, cohesive thing," and, colors and the font and, like, the way that we approach and tackle content, people are really enjoying it, so it's definitely working, so that's good, so
Yeah.
I'm very thankful you guys brought that up, and because again, not my strong suit, but that's why we have a team, right? Everybody has different things that
Yeah.
they're good at and can bring, but yes, it is definitely
Well,
much more
and that doesn't
essential.
make it like that doesn't make it more valuable, right? Like it's not like there's so many pretty posts out there that say absolutely nothing of value and are straight up lying, like 100%. But the nice thing about social media, at least for me, is because I'm somebody who does it, reading is not my strong suit. Like I like I said, I have ADHD. I have a really hard time just reading from like across a page. Like I just have a really hard time with it. And so being able to see something really quick and pretty, like and gets my attention, I can focus on it for a short amount of time. I love that. And that's why I love so many of the graphics that are out there with literature depicted on an Instagram post. Fantastic. But this is Instagram, YouTube, and especially Facebook, like on your Facebook feed, this is where you need that lens of credibility the absolute most, because this is where you're going to find the least credible information among the good things.
Yeah, really, really apply some discernment there. Or, here's the thing here, especially when it comes to social media, right? You see a post and say the post is, saying something that maybe you completely disagree with or have never heard about before. Well, you should probably go and check out other posts on that person's page, right? Don't just
Yeah.
write off the whole person or the page without looking into more information, right? So if it's something
Yeah.
that like is like, what's this? And you're not really sure, um like if I see a post that says fruit makes you fat, I'm like, bye. Like obviously I know this is bullshit, right? But somebody who's maybe just
Right.
starting could be like, is fruit bad? I'm kind of on the fence, I'm not really sure. So maybe then going and seeing what else this person is putting out, right? And if it all seems like this really really intense, like just this one quick solution to this problem, and there's not really a lot of mechanism behind it or whatever, then you're like, okay, maybe this is not the right page or the right group to be following. But I
Yeah.
wouldn't I try not to judge people based off of one post. I try to look at the conglomerate of like what the information they're putting out, because there's you're always going to disagree with someone, right? There's plenty of things that I put out that I'm sure
Right.
people agree with a lot of, and then they disagree with other things, and that's totally
Right.
fine. And the last place to be that I wanted to touch on was in-person seminars.
Mhm.
Because that was on the list as well. And I think that seminars, well, one, I think there is nothing that beats in-person interaction when you're learning, like
Yeah.
nothing. I have been a part of a lot of webinars, as far as like speaking on them, and also attended a lot of webinars. But speaking in person and attending in person is night and day different. Not
Mhm.
only obviously is the information just presented differently, and you get to network and you get to connect, but there's something about physically bringing yourself to a place that you are taking this so much more seriously.
Yeah.
Like, it is just completely different, especially I find, like, I try to go out of my way to travel to events through people, "Oh, when are you coming to my city?" It's like, you can get on a plane as well, that's what I did, you know what I mean, to get
Yeah.
here, and I think
Mhm.
that that also too, like, there's something that makes it more serious, you know what I mean? Obviously, it's great if it's by you, but to be able to travel and to go and to, like, invest in yourself, like, there's you just take that it just takes it to a different level. And the other
Yeah.
thing with seminars too is, and I think what's really great is you get to obviously have these long form discussions and you get to learn and you get to see not just this clickbait stuff, right? You get to see for somebody
Yeah.
talk for an hour or more and you get to interact with them and you get to have a Q&A. And you can take away a lot of things that you like and you don't like from these
Mhm.
events. And that's what I think is so important. And this goes for any information. Taking away what you don't like, whether it's like what the person said or you're like, this kind of, I should maybe look more into this because I'm not really sure where this, if this is accurate or not.
Mhm.
Also, you can pick up on just kind of how somebody communicates. Oh, I like this. I don't like this. I want to add this. So I just think that there's so much that can be picked up from an in-person seminar. Of course, webinars are great too. I'm not knocking webinars. I've done them. I've joined plenty of webinars. Um, but if you can go to an in-person seminar, I think that it is hands down the best experience.
Yeah. And it gives you that like little boost of motivation, or
Oh,
it's almost
100%.
like a refresher where you hear like these new ideas and it gets your creative juices flowing and it gets you like excited again. And then it's
Yes.
just that next little like kick that you need to keep you going just up until, the next exciting thing. We all need those like refreshers in a lot of areas of our life. And I feel
Yes.
like once you're out of school and once you're out of traditional education, it can be really easy to lose those events. So building those in, whatever they may be, I think it's a really nice way to keep you going.
Yeah, for sure. And you're always gonna be, like, jazzed up, you're always gonna learn something, you're always gonna say, "Oh, this sparked this idea," even if they weren't talking about this, it sparked me to think about
Mhm.
that, and now we're gonna execute on it, so, uh,
Yeah.
definitely one of my favorite things. So, that was a those main 2 points were about, you know, like, understanding advice and finding advice, but what about giving responsible advice?
Yeah. And this was a client of mine had this question, and I feel like I can relate to this again before I had my degree and had more background. When you're somebody who's interested in fitness, or like you said, someone who's had a great transformation, or a lot of our competitors out there, people look at you and they think, you know what you're doing. What do I need to do? And they come to you for advice, which is very flattering, and that's really cool. But it can be confusing to know what do I say to them? How do I if I do even have any advice for them, how do I tell them in a way that they're going to understand or be able to apply it to their life, or even like what should I say? So I think I think this is something that a lot of people can relate to.
100%, and I think that especially with the world of social media, right, and people just documenting and sharing, it's reduced the barrier for people to learn more, which is great, but it's also brought down that barrier of, like, people just asking for advice, and thinking that that somebody should be able to give them advice, and it should
Mhm.
work for them, and
Yeah.
obviously, we are coaches, right? That's what we do for a living. And I really, really truthfully believe that as a coach, you start off with one program, right? Say, hey, this is where we're going to start. But all of the great qualities of coaching develop over time as you learn more about this person, you see how they react, how they respond. And a few months in, you know so much more about this client than you ever did before. So for us to say, hey, this is where I thought we were going to be or what we were going to do, it might be different. And you're doing a disservice to somebody who's just asking for advice to be like, yeah, this is what you should do. There are baseline things that I think that everybody should do. I think everybody should go for daily walks and get, some light exposure. Like it's pretty clear that everybody's going to benefit from that, right? So I don't really
Mhm.
need to coach somebody to recommend that. But
Right.
to tell them exactly what they should be doing with their diet, ooh, you know, even as a coach with all this experience, I can have a general idea, right? But
Mhm.
it's still not gonna be fair to give this person
Mhm.
advice, and that's with, my almost 9 years of coaching experience and, competing in degrees and all of this, and it's, so for somebody who's just started or have just made this transformation, it's very, very overwhelming because it's like, "All right, well, this
Mhm.
is what I did, but that might not work for you."
Yeah. Yeah. I think that understanding where they are before you even like talk to them and like give them any type of advice is a really big like starting point, because someone's going to come to you and the first thing they're probably going to say is like, what do you do? Like you had this big transformation, what do you do?
Mhm.
And like you said, you don't, what you do is what you do and works for you. That's not necessarily going to be the best thing for them, especially when you don't know where they're even starting, what they're doing now. Like you don't know anything about them.
No.
So for me to say, oh, well, this is how much cardio I do, and this is how much food I eat, and this is how many times I train per week, and this is what I do for my training, that person could take that exact same formula, apply it to their life, and have nothing happen or have something actually like worse happen for them. So that just telling them what you do typically isn't the best response.
No, and again, social media has made it to where if somebody looks a certain way, right? You think
Mhm.
immediately, "Oh, I should do what they do," right?
Yeah.
And this is not necessarily a wrong assessment, right? Obviously, if somebody has this body, I should probably do what they're doing. But it
Mhm.
doesn't take into context all the other considerations. It doesn't take into context the years and years of training and where their metabolism is and all these different things. Listen to our last podcast with that human baseline hypothesis me and Karina did. And there's so many things that are going to affect how somebody looks and how they respond. And if we were just
Mhm.
to say, "Oh, I see this person eating this food or taking these supplements," or even, people are becoming more and more vocal about if they are taking HRT or not. People, "Oh, what are you taking? How is that appropriate?" You know what I mean? Like what I would be
Mhm.
taking is not the same what you would be taking, right?
Right.
And so again, there's generalizations. Do most people probably need vitamin D and fish oil? Yes. Okay. Wow, my phone just fell and that was on the computer. Um, do most people probably need those things? Yeah. When we're talking about other specifics, it's going to be a lot harder to say without more information, without knowing someone, without coaching them. So it's really honestly irresponsible to give out too many
Mhm.
specifics. So it's always been a hard thing, like when you want to share stuff, like, okay, you share, do you share everything and put it out there?
Yeah.
Or do you not because you don't want people
Mhm.
to necessarily do that? So it can be really, really challenging. But I would say if somebody's in the position to where you are being asked for advice and you want to give responsible advice, that's what you want to do. I would
Mhm.
potentially give a few general things that really helped that were kind of baseline things and say, the
Mhm.
rest of this is, it's going to be very individualized. And I would say either work with a coach. Here's my coach, or here's a handful of coaches that I respect. Here's some other great pages to learn. Here's a course that whatever it is, but you don't
Mhm.
need to feel like you have to give out every specific of what you've done. Because to
Mhm.
be honest, it's probably not going to apply.
Yeah. And that's a big red flag too. If you're asking someone for advice, or even if you're still in the pursuit of looking for advice, if someone is saying, this is what I do, so this is what you should do, that's probably not advice you want to follow, because they're making that leap that, hey, this worked for me, so it's got to work for everybody else, when we know that's not the case. So in getting advice, like watch out for that and look for those people who are going to give you that disclaimer first, like, I'm not a coach, or I'm not a professional. In my experience, this is what has worked for me. Like those are important things to hear when you're asking someone for advice, in my opinion. I would like to hear that, no matter who it's from. Like if someone comes to me for advice, that's probably the first thing I'm going to say is, "Well, I'm not your coach, so I can't give you the advice I would be able to if I had more context in this situation." But then also someone who's going to ask you questions, who's going to want to get to know a little bit more and not just assume, well, this is what I do, so I know this is going to work for you. Somebody who's going to say, like, well, again, what are you doing now? Like, have you ever tracked macros before? Do you like, how many steps are you getting in a day? Do you train? Do you not? Like, okay, well, if you're not training right now, that might be a great place to start. But just jumping right off the bat and saying, oh, you should be training 6 days a week when this person isn't training 1 day a week, like, again, that's great advice for someone who's an avid athlete and wants to take it up a notch. But for someone who's not training at all, that's horrible advice, because then they're going to be like, well, I can't do that, and they're not going to do anything. So, and rather than having someone who's going to try to give you all the answers and then give you exactly what they're doing, look for someone who's going to ask you more questions, who's going to be honest with, I can't give you all the answers. That's going to be a more valuable way to get advice and a better way to give advice.
And it's really tough because as humans, we want very concrete answers. Our brains really thrive on very concrete, direct answers, goals, and all of this, right? So, when in the process of goal setting, you do need to be specific with what you want to do and how you want to achieve it. But it all needs to be in the
Mhm.
context of you. So yes, we do want concrete answers. We do want not just like it depends. So we want specifics, but you
Mhm.
have to know that that information is tailored to you, before
Mhm.
just gathering that information from anybody and saying, okay, well, this is a specific answer because it's probably not.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I understand the desire and the drive to have the answer, right? Because that's just, again, how our
Yeah.
brains are wired.
Mhm.
But do that in the context of when you are working with somebody who's maybe in that field, you guys can set up those specifics. Or if you decide, I have, even if we're not talking about just physique stuff anymore, right? Like if it is a certain goal that you want to set that's outside of this, do the background research, go through all these different types of mediums to learn more, to have a background, and then set it. But just expecting a specific answer when you're, in this like non-specific environment from somebody who doesn't really know you and your history, it's setting you up for
Mhm.
failure. So don't
Yeah.
let that brain circuit like say, okay, no, I need this answer now. No, no, no. Like you're setting yourself up
Yeah.
for short-term failure and potentially even long-term failure. So we'd rather you
Yeah.
be set up for the long term.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I know it's tough. Like this is such a hard topic, especially because, like I said, there's just a different way that people are getting information nowadays,
Yeah.
and it's so accessible that it's actually overwhelming. And I know a lot of people struggle with that. That's like one of the most common things. Like there's so much I don't know what to do, or there's so much, science is lying because it says one thing and then that, whatever. And again, there's a lot of things that could be there too, right? Like what we're talking about, but it's it depends, honestly, is very, very true for specific things. There's always baseline information. Like we said, we made that foundations in nutrition course. That's stuff that everybody can apply, right? um, and we give tools on how to set things up and how to, ask yourself the right questions in the workbooks. But if you want very, very specific things, now you use that information and then you either deduce it yourself to say, okay, this is what I need. This is what I'm going to try. Or you say, okay, I'm going to hire a professional now because now I have this baseline and now I can actually, set these very specific goals for myself. But yeah, don't be too overwhelmed with everything. Use your discernment. Go through those first checkpoints that we talked about, and then when you are in a position to where you are maybe being asked to give advice, just be responsible with it. Be helpful. You can share some of the basic things, but then don't be afraid to refer out when you either don't know something or you're maybe not qualified to talk about it. I think that that's another thing people really struggle with, and it's like I know very, very well what I don't know, and I will never
Yeah.
pretend to know something that I don't. So I can
Mhm.
learn a lot about different areas,
Yeah.
but there's a reason why we have Rick as our team therapist, because as much as I know about habit building and communication and psychology, there is a point where that's not my specialty and that's his. right? So we can say,
Mhm.
okay, here's where you should go. Same thing with medical advice. I can say, hey, here's some things that I think we should probably be looking for with your blood work. Here's a great resource. But then after it comes back, hey, here's a few things that I feel comfortable saying that this, and this could be adjusted. But these other
Mhm.
things over here that I'm seeing, they're off. So here's some other resources to go to get this looked at, to get this adjusted. So again, it's knowing what you don't know, and
Mhm.
not thinking if you don't have to have the answer for everything. If
Yeah.
you think that you have the answer for everything or you're following somebody who has the answer for everything, that's a red flag.
That's fine.
That's like 5 red flags all in one. Like, the flag is on
That should
fire.
be our next that should be our next rant podcast. Instead of rants, we should have topics in a
Red flag.
bowl, we pull them out, and then we list out all the red flags for that topic, like giving advice. Okay, here'd be a red flag, here'd be a red flag.
I am very excited. We're gonna do one. We're actually meeting in person this coming week. I'm so excited. We're gonna
3
have
days.
we're gonna have so much fun together. And then yeah, we're definitely gonna do a tits out rant podcast because why not, right?
Why
So
not?
we really appreciate you guys listening. If you like this week's episode, please share it. This is the best way you can support our show. To check out our coaching services, courses we offer, and additional content we put out, visit teamlocofit.com and follow us on Instagram at teamlocofit.